Greg Warzeka presented a proposal to cut 6 to 9 sports, and they did not vote yes to cut sports or no to cut sports. And both the chair of CURB and the advisor to CURB said they did not vote on whether to cut. And whether or not that 6 to 9 model or proposal was approved by CURB, that's not the final result. The final result was 4 sports. And so they may say that it went through CURB, but the 4 sports did not go through CURB.
Okay. And what were your thoughts on the fundraising aspects of this? You heard me talk about the water polo team and the men's swimming team, which you're a part of. And what's the why couldn't you or your club do this? And is it a $5 million cost has been mentioned from your perspective?
Well, what they've brought up is that if we wanted to the only way to restore our team would be permanently. We couldn't do it year to year. And if we were to do it permanently, we would also have to restore the women's team, or a women's team, which in this case is women's rowing, that was cut in order to maintain Title IX compliance by a prong 1. As a result, the amount of money it would take to endow men's swimming and women's rowing is $25 million. That's more than the entire budget for the intercollegiate athletic department for a year. It's just obscene. And we were first told this on, what was the date? It's March 15th?
Mid-March.
Mid-March, with the cuts, with their statement being cuts were coming at the end of March. Now, they delayed it for 2 weeks, but even with that, it gives us 1 month to come up with, at minimum, $25 million to save my sport.
Okay. What was your thought about the discussion and the interplay between your coach and your coaches here, but how did the coaches play into this decision? You were a sport that was cut.
Well, my coach, together with a majority of other head coaches, put together several proposals that would have maintained all 27 sports using resources from the teams, and it included in there a $400,000 cut from the administration. But when the administration told them what they told us when we met with them mid-March, that's when we got our $25 million number, they told our coaches that the administrators were overworked and underpaid. As a result, that $400,000 cut couldn't come, and so they would have to tax essentially each sport. And beyond that, these proposals thrown in by the coaches were not cleared through Title IX. Every time we gave them an option, they said it was not going to be feasible through Title IX.
Through Title IX?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your understanding of the discussions that these had to be made this year and the ongoing budget crisis, obviously, at the university? I mean, what do you, as a swimmer, in a sport that's cut, I mean, how are people feeling about that on the team, that this is part and parcel of we're just out there, we're unprotected class, and therefore, even though we have a world-class facility, very nice facility, how does that make you feel? How does it coincide with?
It certainly makes us feel targeted. I mean, as I said, rowing was on every cut model, and so was swimming. We certainly feel targeted.
And what are you going to do now? I mean, what year are you in?
I'm in my 4th year.
Okay. So what do you do?
I have 1 more year until I graduate.
Okay.
I came to UC Davis to continue. I transferred to UC Davis to both continue my education and to swim at the Division I level. I lose half of that, or more than, or a vast portion of that. And for me, swimming is just as much part of my education as the classes I take. And so I still can't fathom what my life will be like next year, now that they've taken the athlete part away from my title of student athlete.
And what is your thought process on swimming club? I mean, this everyone will be allowed, and how does that work within your particular sport?
Well, if we chose to do a UC Davis club sport, those of us who are on scholarship, I'm on a small scholarship, we would be allowed to be on the roster and practice, but we would not be allowed to compete, despite what Athletic Director Greg Gorzak has said about modifying rules and getting exceptions. There are rules beyond just UC Davis. There are league rules that do not allow scholarship athletes to compete because it would get, on the rationale, it would be unfair to other teams.
I see. So your swim season's over?
Yes, for UC Davis.
For UC Davis. So the options for you at this point to continue to swim are what?
I could swim for the USA Swimming, and that's it.
Okay. And USA Swimming mean you have to be at a certain time in the league before you can continue on, or you just join seamlessly?
Yeah, it would be fairly seamless. Our coach runs a rec program that also shelters a USA Swimming team, so I could potentially train with that team.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. And is there anything else you'd like to add that you've heard tonight? And this is your opportunity to take your time and look through some of the notes and give us some of your impressions and for the record.
Well, just initially, I'm noticing that Chancellor Katehi said that we can't add sports because of the budget climate. But when swimming was added, when it was initially added, it was 1939. And that's the tail end of the Great Depression in the United States. If we can add it then, how can we not maintain it now? Oh, and then one other thing I'd like to bring up is in 1993, there were 1,000 athletes on campus. Since then, students have voted to increase their fees, and the athletic department budget has increased. But the number of student athletes on campus has been cut in half. Could you help us figure out why that's happening?
You're referring to the fact that we passed this initiative, we had 1,000 athletes roughly, and now we're back to about 500 after these particular cuts. So more students come to campus, right? The population gets bigger, I assume, and they're paying more fees, so the fees are getting larger, yet the athletic teams are downsized.
Exactly.
And you're trying to wonder how that works, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what does that indicate to you from your perspective?
It seems to indicate out of control spending and lack of oversight.
Mm-hmm. So fewer amount of athletes, budgets that are much bigger due to the growing population, and that's a very valid concern. Absolutely. What else do you have on your list there, Zach? Yes.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to add that talking to some of the administrators who are in...
Just repeat your name.
Sorry, Darcy Ward.
Darcy Ward, okay.
If you talk to the administrators who are in the quote-unquote work group who advised and gave recognition about the proposals that were given to them, they were never given a 27-sport model.
Okay.
There was never a model that they looked at that they felt, even if it wasn't feasible, that they said that they could have looked at it.
Okay.
And in some of the documents that we have stated that that is one of the reasons why some resigned, because they couldn't say wholeheartedly that this was the best choice, like Chancellor Katehi said, that this is the best choice, that this is the best option for the school. I agree with them. I don't understand how that can be a best option and a best choice when a 27-sport model wasn't even looked at. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to say that you're not going to cut football, okay, well, what do you say about keeping all 27 sports?
Mm-hmm. Okay, good point.
And the last thing I'd like to say is that we're all here tonight because we're students, and the faculty, Kim Ellsbach and Leslie Lyons, who are the two faculty who resigned from the Intercollegiate Athletic work group that was created by Vice Chancellor Fred Wood to advise on this entire situation. They resigned, and they're not here because they were concerned about retaliation similar to that at Diablo Valley College. those people who brought up complaints at Diablo Valley no longer have their jobs. And as such, we're students. We can't be fired. And so we're here to take up the burden that they weren't able to shoulder.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If I may also speak about the work group, I took office.
State your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Jack Swald.
Thank you.
When I came into office, it was about in the middle of this process, and I talked to the former associate vice chancellor as the time progressed, and I learned about this work group, and I learned that the work group is going to be making a serious decision or an advisory decision to the chancellor, the associate chancellor. I apologize, the vice chancellor. I asked if I could be on it. As it came closer, considering that my constituents are 70% plus stakeholders in the institution. The Associate Vice Chancellor at that time informed me that I was not knowledgeable enough about the situation and I wouldn't be able to catch up in time to make a real impact on the discussion. So I think that's pretty problematic. I think that considering that we have a large stake in the funding, the fact that the AS president, I'm not sure if my predecessor was involved, but I certainly was not involved in that process. I find that troubling considering our large financial contribution and the fact that those decisions directly affect my constituents and part of the UC Davis family.
Okay, yes.
Darcy Ward. Also, just on that note, when we did ask to become more involved and make it a more transparent process, I was told that it was too complicated for me to understand. I understand organic chemistry. I think I could kind of figure this out. And I think if given the opportunity, it would have been a great educational experience for all of us. Like I think we've all figured out, this has been a steep learning curve, but I think we've learned more within the past 6 months of trying to fight this. And I think we've learned how to be more involved with our community because of it. And I just cannot imagine what it would have been like, to be actually involved with the process and to have learned from our administrators and to have them teach me. They talk about the teacher coach model, and it would have been lovely to be able to look up to these administrators and have them really take it upon themselves to explain fully what was going on. On that note, I didn't even know my sport was cut until I got a text message from a friend saying to me at a press conference, because instead of telling the athletes first, they told the media first.
Okay. Okay, let's, Zach, is there anything else you'd like to add, or you're good for now?
I'm good for now.
Okay. Heidi, let's like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for joining us tonight. Pull that mic a little closer to you. That would be great. There you go.
Thank you for having me. I am on the women's swim team and women's water polo team.
And give me your full name for the record.
Heidi Casera.
Casera, okay.
I'm the only member up here who is not on a cut team.
Okay.
I have been on the academic honor roll multiple times. I was named UC Davis Athlete of the Year last year. I was also named Big West Female Athlete of the Year. I am the first female athlete to ever accomplish or qualify for Division I NC2A for swimming in UC Davis history. I have met with Kim Elsbach, Leslie Lyons. I have written to Mr. Woods and had some sort of meeting with him. I have been in the meeting that was probably in March with Athletic Director Warzeka and his assistant, Nona. I also was in the meeting with the CURB. And I also asked for the California Public Request Act regarding anything about the elimination of sports. And the reason I'm here today is because I was told that the only option in this budget crisis was to cut teams. So in the current economic times, it seems things will only get worse before they get better, leading me to believe that if policies do not begin to change, more opportunities like women's swimming will be eliminated at UC Davis.
Give me some of your impressions. You mentioned CURB. What did you think of the through or by discussion, and how is it supposed to work, given that are you on the committee?
No, I am not.
You're not. But you were able to observe, or?
No, I actually just requested a meeting with Richie No, the chair of
Okay. Okay.
And I specifically asked him, because I knew that this was a big issue, saying that the CURB can approve something, because most of the times advisory committees only advise. They do not have this kind of authority over a situation.
Right.
So I asked him specifically if he ever, I wrote it down exactly, if he was ever presented in a way to approve, or is he ever asked to approve anything? And he told me, he said no. And he said anybody on the committee would agree with him. So when I heard that they voted on something, either he did not tell me or it didn't happen. And then we also met with somebody who advises the curb, and I asked him the same exact question. And I asked him, did you guys get to approve anything? And he said no. So that's from two sources. I mean, they could have not been telling me that they voted on something, but under my understanding, nothing was ever approved. And I have the minutes from the meeting, from the Public Request Act, and there was nothing about a vote being taken once Warzeka left the room.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add that you may have heard? And
I think that's it for now.
okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Our wrestlers, Ricky and give me your name. I'm sorry.
I'm John Thurston.
John Thurston. Thank you both for joining us, and I'd like to hear what both of you have to say. And Ricky's from my hometown, so we'll start with you first. Or at least my home area.
All right, well, I'm Ricardo Seguera Alcala, and I was born in Bakersfield and raised in Arvin, Lamont, small farm working community just south of Bakersfield. And honestly, I wasn't as involved as the rest of my colleagues were. I have 1 year left. I just graduated, and I majored in Spanish. I was originally a double major in Spanish and exercise biology, and I have 5 classes left in exercise biology, but I'm not able to finish because I still want to continue wrestling, so I was kind of forced to graduate early. And I wasn't as involved because I was trying to get all my stuff together. If not, I would have definitely been on top of it. It was really difficult transferring. My only option was to go to grad school. So now I'll be going to Indiana University and getting my master's in sports management when I had originally planned to get my doctorate in physical therapy. And it was a lot of time. I spent countless hours with my counselor, doing applications, figuring out what my options were, what I couldn't do. I couldn't transfer undergrad and seek another bachelor's degree. The quarter system doesn't allow, like some of the units don't transfer over. Most schools are semester schools, so that was a big obstacle for me. And grad school, getting my application done, taking recruiting trips during the quarter system, it's not fun. I was gone every weekend. I had to do midterms, finals, just interrupted my whole process. Luckily, I still got like a 3-something and even got a B in MPB 101, which is like one of the hardest classes in UC Davis during this whole process. But just studying for the GREs, taking the exam, what is like a 3-4 hour exam, just all kinds of stuff. Coaches constantly calling me. It was a difficult process for me, but luckily I made it through and continue wrestling and my education.
How did you hear about this cut?
I was sitting in my biology class when my teammate next to me was like, "Here, you need to look at this." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he handed me his phone, and my coach was like, "You guys need to get to this meeting right now because the word is that they're cutting our sport." And before that, I had no idea that we were even going to be cut.
And when was that do you happen to remember roughly some time frame? Or
It was on a Friday. I know that.
Was it Friday?
It was Friday, and it was like after like the first 2 weeks of
I think it was April 15th.
Around April 15th.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when the letter roughly went from the vice chancellor to the chancellor. Yeah. Correct?
Yeah.
What was your coach's discussion when you had your meeting?
Well, it was rough. We went to the locker room, and it was I said in my little speech, but it was kind of like losing my oldest brother, mixed with like emotions of like hatred and betrayal.
I can see that. And how about your teammates?
Everybody was silent.
And so what did you feel that your recourse was at that time? I mean, what...
I didn't know. I couldn't think anything clear. When I was in class, teacher was talking. I couldn't comprehend anything. That week after was really hard.
Mm-hmm. And what did you? It's kind of hard to put this question, but how did you feel when you just heard your administrators say that you were one of the programs on the list because you were an unprotected, if you will? I mean, you didn't hear a facility argument, or maybe other factors entered into it, but you were kind of just out there, and they had to make cuts. I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, would you have heard another rationale for why your program was cut?
Definitely.
Well, tell me what you would have heard and understood and accepted.
I mean, I don't know. It's like if they had a protocol and they should have followed it, not, this reason of, your sport wasn't protected, so we had to cut you. I don't see that as a valid reason to cut our sport.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. I'd like to get your perspective as well. Thank you, Ricky.
Once again, my name's John Thurston. I'm also a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
My background, I grew up in a small dairy community of 1,600 people in Northern California. I made it into Davis on my academics. I was the salutatorian of my high school. And I chose to go to Davis over schools like Cornell and Columbia. It's because Davis allowed me to stay within California. It allowed me to pursue a Division I wrestling career, and it was a top-rate institute. In addition to this, Davis was sold as a town of respect and of mutual, respect. That was one of the big reasons I came. So that's about it for where I'm from. And my reactions to the elimination of our teams were very similar to Ricky's. I found out through text message from a friend of a friend of a friend. And I found out 5 minutes before a press conference on, I believe it was April 15th. And from there, I spent the day running around trying to find where the press conference was, because originally they told us it was at the ARC, the Activities and Recreation Center, and then they moved it to the Alumni Center, and then I was told it was back at the ARC, and then I was told it was back at the Alumni Center. I drove across town 5 times trying to find it out, and then when I got there, we weren't allowed in. We weren't allowed to know what was happening. So.
Mm-hmm. And did you go to the team meeting as well?
Yes, I was in attendance at the team meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And
did everyone decide at the team meeting to find the press conference, or was that after?
That was 2 or so hours after.
After
the press conference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And why do you, all of you, you sound like you all heard, did anybody have a prior knowledge and indication that this was going to occur?
No.
There were rumors. Mm-hmm. And there were rumors that it was 9 to 11 sports,
gotcha.
Which we all feel was blown out of proportion to make it seem like they were the saving grace by only cutting 4.
Gotcha.
And other than that, we kind of knew we were on the chopping block because other institutions always cut women's rowing. Mm-hmm. Even though previously I believe it was told that we weren't going to be cut, and that there were no, earlier in that year, there were going to be no cuts to athletics. Mm-hmm. And then we got another word in February that there might be cuts. Mm-hmm. But it was like an insider source or something. So mm-hmm. It was all very wishy-washy, very rumor, and no one knew who to count on, and no one knew any answers, and the people in charge couldn't give us anything, any concrete details, and they're the ones in charge and just keeping mm-hmm. things from us because it's too emotional. So,
mm-hmm. Anybody else?
In my meeting in March, it did come to the point that we knew that teams were going to be cut, mm-hmm. and so I did know beforehand. Mm-hmm. Like a little bit, if that's more of what you were mm-hmm. asking. It wasn't a shock to me that teams got cut. Yeah. But in that meeting, we asked over and over again what teams are going to be cut. Mm-hmm. And they said 13. Like 13 teams were on the table. And so to me, I was freaking out, because I want to be able to swim next year.
Right.
And I wanted to know what it would take to bring these teams back. And I was told that as of a meeting that the coaches had, I think it was March 4th, I'm not exactly sure, that there was a time clock that started for us to raise the endowment monies for our team to bring them back. So that means that on that date, we were halfway through the time period of me to raise the endowments for my team. And so it came down, I think we had 15 days, and I asked them how much it would cost to raise endowment money for me and men's swimming. And they told me it was $10 million. So I was in the middle of finals and about to go into our winter break, knowing that I was supposed to raise $10 million if I wanted to swim next year. So that part was very shocking.
To the aquatic folks, just for a moment, I mean, how does the water polo example work, and what did you think of that conversation?
Well, we use the same facility. We have no problem scheduling time. It's an amazing facility, and the fact that they intend to not use it to its full ability is incredible. And then they've told us the entire time we couldn't fundraise for next year's operating budget or to exist because it was quote unquote soft money. We couldn't count on it. But now they tell us that water polo, like we find out that they're essentially punishing water polo for water polo's success in fundraising by making them fundraise their operating budget. They're forcing water polo to, and they wouldn't even allow us to.
Gotcha. And who's they when you say they?
This would be the Intercollegiate Athletics Department Senior Management Group: Greg Borseca, Nona Richardson, Cindy Spiro, and Mike Bazemore.
Okay. And what do you think? What do you think that the possibilities of your team matching water polo? I mean, this is a much costlier program. I think it's been mentioned earlier by the administrators.
Well, our head coach has volunteered to give up his coaching salary for 2 years, and with that, we have our operating budget in entirety for at least 1 year.
Okay. And women's swimming, you guys are fine? I mean, how does it feel not to have a men's team? What does it add value? No value?
Once I found this out, I looked online, and I looked through on college swimming the amount of recruits that go to schools with men's and women's sports. And I found that the large majority of the top swimmers in the United States only go to teams with men's sports. And I think it was about the 90th, but I'd have to double check. I didn't really check it fully, but I think I got to the 90th person who went to a team that had only women swimming. And, I mean, it's half my team is cut right now, in my opinion. We travel together. Sometimes we just find planes together. When we go to a swim meet, we stand in the same places. They cheer for me. I mean, half my team has been cut. And I would also just like to say about the men's water polo thing. In that meeting in mid-March, I asked specifically, what if I could guarantee 3 to 5 years of operating costs? Because I knew that water polo had raised that much money. And I was told that teams were not allowed to, quote-unquote, limp along, and that we would have problems with fundraising in the future, or not fundraising, have problems with fundraising and have problems with recruiting, and that we would have a small roster size. But I completely disagree with this fact, because when I was here my freshman year, we had a roster of 16 girls. If one of us was sick, we did not have a full roster to compete against, and now we're going to be one of the best teams in California. So I completely disagree that fundraising and just having a soft money income is impossible.
Okay. Yes.
Also, one of the documents that Heidi looked at, I don't know, showed that women's teams went faster when they had men's comparison teams to compete against. So.
Okay, it's another good statistic. Anybody would like to add anything else to the panel before we take public testimony? Ricky or anyone like to add anything to the record?
Yeah, my name's John Thurston once again, and I have concern over this idea that we'd be able to continue our athletic careers. As you can tell, Ricky went through a tremendous amount of stress and ordeal to find a place where he could continue wrestling, and it affected his future. You know, he had to sacrifice part of his future in order to be able to wrestle.
Right.
And I, unfortunately, as a lot of the other members of my team, a majority of the team, and I know it's a pretty similar situation on the swim team, we're not going to be able to continue our wrestling careers at other colleges, and we're not going to be able to compete at the same levels we competed at. We were competing on a national scale. We were wrestling guys who are ranked 5th in the nation. That's where we were competing at, and that really defined who we were as students, as athletes. So, be it because we have our ties at wrestling, or ties to UC Davis, or we have specific roles we fill on teams, there's not really a market for us out there, nor is there someone willing to pay for us. And if you're a walk-on, such as myself, you're not going to receive financial aid, even if you had the opportunity to earn financial aid in future years of competition.
Sorry, Darcy Ward, just to reiterate what we told the Senate, we all realize that these are hard economic times, and we realize that decisions need to be made and that cuts might be necessary. But if they're willing to guarantee us scholarship money, and they're willing to give us opportunities in the weight room and with the trainers that are available, I know the rowing team has fundraised a lot of money this year just because we pay for our own shells and things like that through that. And I know that the swim team has fundraised, and the wrestling team, gosh, they have an entire network of people to work with. Why can't we be given an opportunity for one more year if they've already guaranteed us all these other things?
Good point. All right. Yes.
And I think that most of the problems that we've discussed today could be solved by strengthening the weakening shared governance system within the UC system. If we had the ability for students, faculty, administrators, staff to come together and come to a consensus on these issues, I don't think we'd be sitting here today. And I think that the one-year moratorium on these cuts, to look forward to a new process that would make these decisions, is the first step towards a more democratic UC and solving these problems and making sure that the entire campus community works together as a unit and not as disparate groups that have a very adversarial nature towards one another. And I think that the first step is here.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry. Kateki mentioned, what about the families who lost their jobs because of these budget cuts to the whole Davis campus? But I want to know, what about the families who can't afford to send their kids to college now? Ricky can explain to you some of the scholarship issues, like of the scholarship he's going to get next year. I don't know if you want to reiterate about that.
Yeah, they talked about, Ricky, I'll call him again, talked about how our grant and aid was awarded for the next years as we continue to pursue our undergraduate education. But I disagree. It's not fully true. I signed a scholarship with UC Davis for, should I give numbers? For $2,500, and which is very minimal. I receive a lot of aid, but that would still require me to pull out like an $10,000 loan. And I redshirted my first year. Then I eventually, after the years went on, I eventually earned. I was maxed out in money, so I was like on the full ride there. So now, what they're telling me is that my money's going to be reduced back to $2,500, and I would have to pull out $8,000, $10,000 loan to continue school next year, which I'm not going to do.
Right. Good point.
I want to mention two things real quick. Greg Warzeka said that the facilities and campus enhancement money, that's a student initiative, is not included in the ICA budget because it's only for facilities and for debt on those facilities. Well, Greg Warzeka and his management group have requested that staff salaries come out of that money for next year, and that's one of the ways they're closing their budget hole.
Base money. Okay.
Yes. And then I would also like to speak to why Leslie Lyons and Kim Elsbach resigned from their positions in the Intercollegiate Athletic Department work group. They both they both pointed to the self-study that we used in our transition to Division I, and it has a process for making major decisions. And it says that these decisions, the typical major decisions, must go through a set process. Well, the argument, and they argue that if any decision is major in intercollegiate athletics, it's cutting sports. So if anything should go through this process, it should be this, and it hasn't. And despite the attempts to create a paper trail, including the work group that these two sat on and resigned from, it does not fulfill the process that's been laid out. And that Professor Ellsbach specifically said that the report, which the work group submitted to Fred Wood, the reason she was resigning and had such a large problem with the report was not because of what was in it, but because of what was not. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. We very much appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. Anything you would like to submit that you might think about later, you can obviously email us, and we'll make sure it's part of the record.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all. Okay, we're now at public comment, and so we have a list, and of course people can talk after this list as well, but let's have Benjamin West, to be still here, Dr. Sherry Coburn. And we can just go right up to the microphone would be great. Thank you.
All right, my name is Benjamin West, and I'm a parent of a UC Davis athlete. My son's a wrestler. He was a freshman this year. It was interesting. My son had the opportunity to be recruited by quite a few different schools. He had the opportunity to potentially go out to Northwestern University in Illinois. I know Mrs. Kate's from that area, so I know she's familiar with the school. He ultimately decided to attend UC Davis on a wrestling scholarship because of the high academics and also the location to his family, the proximity. From the time my son was young, wrestling, we've seen a lot of elite athletes leave our state. And I always told him, always reminded him, son, there's no reason to leave. You can get everything you want to get done with your athletics and your academics here in California. This is a great state. And I really was encouraged when he made the decision to go to UC Davis and wrestle. The coaches there were fantastic. I mean, they had coaches who were, national finalists and All-Americans. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better group of men to lead the team. And my son Kyle is the oldest of our 6 children. And so I'm a family man, first and foremost. And when I evaluate the situation at UC Davis and Mrs. Kate coming out from Illinois, she took charge of, admittedly, the UC Davis family. She's the head of the UC Davis family. She's responsible for all of those young people to grow and mature under her care. I've heard a lot of talk about the budget. Hey, we all have budgets. You have one at your house. I have one at my house. Hers is significantly bigger at UC Davis. But I just want to run this situation by this analogy. With our 6 kids, when we come to tough financial times, there's never been a point where my wife and I have said, okay, time out, family meeting. Kids, come in, sit down, we have to have a talk. The kids all come, sit, and we talk, and we go, okay, you 4 kids, you get to keep living here, and we're going to keep feeding you, and we're going to care for you. You 2 kids, you have to go. We can't care for you anymore. No, that's not the way it works at my house. In our house, we care for our kids, as we've promised to do from the time that they were little. We tell them that we're going to help them grow and mature through life. That's the charge that she's been put in. Now, what does happen is my wife and I, as the responsible adults in the house, caring in our situation, we make the sacrifices. We pass on driving the new vehicles. We make sure that everybody understands that, hey, listen, if we're in a tough financial situation in our family, there's other ways to make things happen. Kids, we need to all shut the lights off. Guys, we're not going to be having the, Cheerios and the fruity, we'll go to generic brands. Whatever has to happen for our family to stay together and for our kids to be cared for at the same level, we will do. but at no point would we ever turn our backs on our children. And these young people who have come to UC Davis, they have come with a promise. And when they refer to this promise I'm talking about is these core principles that you've referred to. And when you're asking them what their core principles are about, and they're saying, what's a core principle? But it's more of a, it kind of depends. I mean, if you're in tough financial times, that's like saying a red light is more of a suggestion. No. If you have a principle and you've put it to the kids, it's a principle. You stand behind it and you lead by example. You don't turn your back on it the first time times get a little bit tough. But that's exactly what's happening here. There are other ways for them to meet this budgetary shortfall. I understand that this is a legitimate crisis. I do not envy the position that these folks in this front row are in. They're intelligent people. However, they are looking at this budgetary crisis and saying that we have to make a change now and we have to send these kids out. No, you don't. At one point it was good. It's going to get good again. You got to figure out how to make adjustments. When you said that they purchased, I don't even care if it's $500,000 worth of bottled water, but they cut these sports teams. I've looked at the budgets. We've been trying to get information from these folks for months and months, and I'm just so thankful for this process here to actually be able to hear some of the true information. But to see these budgets that these teams are trying to go through, I know the wrestling team, it's approximately $350,000 a year. Hey, guys, go to the freaking tap. That's 3 years of wrestling right there. The swimmers have got to be close, the rowers, and to not allow the athletes to participate in the process of saving themselves, it's crazy. I'm not a college-educated man. I was happy to finish high school. I stood up and cheered they gave me that diploma. I look at these folks here. They are wildly intelligent people. But what I'm not seeing is them utilizing the full capacity of their common sense and saying there are definitely other ways for us to fulfill the needs of our UC Davis campus family. So I would implore you guys to try to go back and not make the easy thing of saying our decision is final. Look, I've said things to my kids, and then later I've thought about grace, and I've thought about forgiveness, and I've thought about interactions I've had with my own dad, and I've said, you know what, son, I know I said that to you, and I was really upset or angry, or we were in a tough time, but I was wrong. Or maybe I wasn't wrong, but I'm going to give you grace, and we're going to work out another situation. And that's what I'm asking for here, is I'm asking for you guys to go back to the drawing table and say, you know what, we've already offered these kids to continue here with their grant and aid. They're going to be here for another year no matter what. Let's let them participate in their sports, and let's see if we can do something different and allow these young people to stay on our campus. Because if they leave, like Ricky has to, and go to Indiana, my son goes to Utah, these other kids go into different states, guess what happens? They meet someone, they get married, they stay in that community, and then they become coaches and mentors in that community, and they're putting their fingerprint on kids in that community. Then who are the ones that are helping our kids here in California? These people right now who are youth are going to become great leaders. I see this wall. These are great people that are on this wall. There's great kids right here in this room that deserve an opportunity to fulfill their education in California. They deserve the opportunity to go and finish their UC Davis career and do it with the intent that they went there, with their athletics intact. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sherry Coburn. And after that, we have Paul Medved and Don Perry.
Senator Flores, thank you so much for this opportunity to address your committee as well as parents and UC Davis folks. My name is Dr. Sherry Coburn, and I'm in K-12 education, so I understand the difficulties that education has faced taking 60% of the budget cuts when we comprise only 40% of the budget. I just need to say that my programs are all soft money, so I write grants for all of my programs and sustain my my staff. And we too have had to make budget cuts. But I just want to say a little bit about what I believe needs to really be considered, and that is that academic institutions are built on democracy that inherently foster fairness and opportunity for all students. My son, Ryan, who is a student at UC Davis, was offered scholarships to Brown and Cornell. But I, too, wanted him to stay in California primarily because he would be a third-generation UC Davis attendee. However, he's been robbed of such opportunity through the recent budget cuts. The process of providing fiscal transparency as well as accountability for the decisions that were made are lacking. Otis said taxation without representation is tyranny, and clearly the students of Davis have had tyranny committed against them. I question the integrity of those responsible, as well as their capacity to represent honestly the decisions that were made. Best possible case scenarios for students is farthest from the truth. Robert Putnam said that people initially form institutions and then institutions form people. If the process of how decisions are supposed to be made were modeled through the backdoor decisions and fiscal persuasions, then shame on UC Davis for such ill regard of modeling and poor fiscal practices. Lack of student input, irregard for stakeholders, and teacher input, as well as staff and coaches, as at least disrespectful. We must question why 2 ad hoc committee members resigned when their response to multiple requests for fiscal information were denied. We must inquire why the criteria for how fiscal decisions were made with such cuts were withheld from stakeholders, including myself. We must ponder whether the lack of UC Davis response to our calls represent at best apathy or autocratic mantra. For 2 weeks, I called, wrote emails, only to receive blanket responses and replies for an unjustified move. If UC Davis is to walk the walk of their 8 principles, they should not be compromised in fiscally tight times. We must foster student academic excellence. And then we must look towards the cancer that is growing within the administrative and athletic division that would make such ill-repaired decisions. We are willing here to collectively support our wrestling programs, but we're told, in fact, that we must raise $7 million for the wrestling team and then $7 million for the other team. Now, I run after-school programs in San Joaquin County. I have $5 million in after-school programs at 19 school sites. So I was quite shocked that I'd have to raise such high levels of money. And, you know, as a single mom at one time, I worked 4 jobs to pay off my doctoral program. You find ways to make ends meet, whether you have to cut funds or programs, but you do it holistically. I'm wondering how an institution can an anchor D1 program. They talked about wrestling being D1, and yet here they're cutting it in response to fiscally tight times. How can you have such a philosophical disconnect? Football brought in $88,000 for fundraising last year. Wrestling was only behind 12% at $69,921. So I guess I'm going to ask is that even though you're cutting the wrestling program, which I now just learned was $250,000, so we'll say $70,000, that's, you know, I don't know where the $7 million came from when the program costs, you know, $250,000. We need to lead by example. Last year when I attended UC Davis orientation, Ms. Ratto talked about the budget, and they talked about the promenade and the presidential corridor and how these buildings were going to line up. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, I'm cutting in K-12 education, but they're talking about all these capital projects and all of these fiscals. It is really about perception. And I feel like we were misled. I feel like the premises of the 8 fundamental core pieces are gone. I feel like they've gone by the wayside, and I really question the integrity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Paul Medved and Don Perry after that.
Senator Flores, I cannot thank you enough for what you're doing here. This has been an extraordinary evening, and though I'm one of the least of the stakeholders as just an alumni, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this. because this really does affect us all as members of the family of UC Davis. I graduated back in 1978. I met my wife of 32 years at UC Davis. Our oldest daughter, Emily, is an Aggie as well, having graduated just last year. She was a swimmer, and through her we became reacquainted with all forms of Aggie athletics. We traveled from our home in the Bay Area just as often as we could to attend games and events and functions, and we got to know athletes and parents and coaches and administrators, and it was terrific. It really was. It didn't always end in victory on the playing field, but it was always a celebration of a university that had its values intact and its priorities right. And to me, that has always been the real game. And in it, as far as I'm concerned, UC Davis remains undefeated. Let me also say that we remain extremely pleased and proud to this day of so much what else is happening on campus. We turn up the radio every time there's an expert from UC Davis on NPR speaking about critical issues of our time: the environment, renewable energy, transportation, water quality, sustainable agriculture. The list goes on. Then came this decision to cut sports. I can tell you since last March, I have been one confused, frustrated, impassioned, energized, and activated individual. But though I disagree with the decision to cut sports, it's not the decision itself that offends me. If after an appropriately designed and conducted process, it became the consensus of the campus community to do so, then so be it. I'm certain I'd be happy. I'm certain I would not be happy, but I doubt I'd have traveled 100 miles to be here tonight. No, what is truly offensive to me is that the new administration has seen fit to allow and even sanction the official disengagement from the core values and principles of intercollegiate athletics, as well as from any semblance of due process regarding that disengagement. It has seen fit to lay the groundwork for a more exclusive and less diverse sort of program, the kind that can schedule games against big-time opponents, cash in on lucrative TV contracts, and entertain hordes of fans. It's a very slippery slope, at the top of which the values and ethics of one's competition can be argued to matter more than one's own. At the bottom, it's a long way down. What was it that the Knight Commission had to say about the perils of that type of program? And how thrilled is the U.S. Department of Education with the graduation rates of student athletes from ever so many big-time sports programs, schools? Is that really who UC Davis should be trying to compete with? Is that really who UC Davis should be trying to emulate? The administration has said it was all very unfortunate. It has said it was all very complicated. It has said it had no good alternative. It swears it followed the rules. It has not only said that it must be this way, but it has said we should be grateful that it's not worse. Well, thanks to the California Public Records Act, we now have access to documents which do not support those assertions. Okay, it's undeniably unfortunate that the state is in such a financial mess, and that there are lots of moving parts. But for Pete's sakes, as has been pointed out earlier, this is the University of California we're talking about. That this problem could be considered too complicated to share with its stakeholders is equal parts preposterous and insulting. That there weren't viable alternatives that could have met both budgetary and Title IX requirements while preserving all sports, or that the majority of the coaches preferred the cutting of some sports so that the rest could carry on with business as usual is simply not true. And speaking of Title IX, that prong one could be cited as an urgent driving factor in justifying these cuts is as patently disingenuous as it is potentially a violation of the terms by which the university settled the Brust case. Instead of following the intent of its own Division I self-study process for major decision-making, the administration decided it could conveniently redefine the meaning of the word consultation, and instead sanction a process designed to hatch, bully through, and then defend its own preconceived conclusion to cut sports. In so doing, it deliberately shut out legitimate stakeholders, including the students themselves, the primary funders of the program. It abandoned commitments to its own core principles. It disrespected the work of those who, for most of the past century, worked to participate in and build a broad and diverse athletics program, a program that nurtured, challenged, and empowered its student athletes to dream, work hard, compete well, honor their sport, their teammates, their competitors, their university, and ultimately themselves. It crushed the dreams and lifelong loyalties of nearly 150 of its own student athletes, and it slammed the door on those who would follow in their footsteps for generations to come. And instead of providing its students with a case study in the merits of due process and the means for facing a tough challenge, building a consensus, and moving forward through and beyond this temporary crisis as one community, it has seriously squandered the opportunity, made this fine mess, and tries now, even now, to defend its actions. But the good news is it is still salvageable. No one is suggesting the physical realities be ignored, just understood. No one is suggesting that athletics be preserved or promoted over academics, just recognized and valued. The late John Wooden had a favorite poem that goes like this: "No written word, no spoken plea can teach our youth what they should be, nor all the books on all the shelves. It's what the teachers are themselves." I once again call upon the administration to do the honorable thing, to admit its mistake, to restore the cut sports, to reunite these student athletes with their teacher coaches, their teammates, their sports, which are their passions, and the love and respect they are entitled to feel for their chosen university. I further call upon it to then embark on an appropriate, fair, inclusive, transparent, and unrushed process to find a better, more equitable solution to this temporary fiscal challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Perry, and then after that, Adam Borchard and Dan Beneview. Something I can't read the writing. You know who you are. So,
hi, I'm Don Perry. Actually, I thought I was going to be the last speaker, but so I'm going to repeat some things probably other people have said. But like Paul Medved, I'm also an Aggie alumnus, and my wife there, so we both are Aggie alumnus, and I'm the father of a swimmer. I want to first just say something about Kim Ellsbach. During this whole time that all of the budget crisis was going on, I wrote hundreds of emails to people here and to Kim and to different people. And Kim was the only one who actually answered the emails personally. And we occasionally got a form letter, but she was very nice and answered them and kind of bolstered, I think, all of our concern for what was going on. When the proposed sports cuts became an issue, Paul Medved and I met by phone with Vice Chancellor in charge of alumni relations to explore the possibilities of fundraising to try to close the funding gap. We were told that if the administration chose to support fundraising, the entire resources of the Alumni Association would be available to help. When I talked with Director Warzeka about it about a week or two later, he told me that fundraising at this level was impossible beyond what the university was currently doing. A couple of weeks later, the comment was made in print that the university was going to review fundraising efforts by individual sports to see how effective they were. At best, mixed messages were sent, and in no time do I believe that the athletic community was encouraged to raise funds to offset budget shortfalls, since such activity was not seen as a sustainable practice. As we all know, the state passes a budget for 1 year at a time and deals with the fiscal reality of that year, hoping that the future will be better. And I think the same thing applies to the university. Instead of creating an environment of sadness, anger, and bitterness, the university could create a win-win situation by continuing all sports for at least another year and letting the athletic community and its supporters strive to cover the budget shortfall with contributions, while at the same time allowing for a more thorough and transparent review of all the options available. The university would appear to be compassionate and willing to explore every avenue, and the student athletes and their supporters would have the opportunity to reach out and solicit donations to cover each year the funding is needed. Maybe even some endowments would come through. The argument has been put forth that such an effort would cripple the teams and put recruiting at a disadvantage. With the caliber of coaches from the teams that have been eliminated, I don't think that would necessarily be true. And I think the athletes on those teams and the athletes who had planned to come here would be willing to take that chance. So my plea is to extend the sports for a year and give everyone a chance. Thank you.
thank you. We have Adam Borchard. Okay. Dan Beneview. Next to Delgado. Dustin Nick. Okay.
Okay. My name is Dan Bienvenu. I'm a senior portfolio manager in the investment office of CalPERS.
Okay.
I'm also a UC Davis alumni, graduating Phi Beta Kappa in 1993 and was a member of the wrestling team. Senator Flores, I very much appreciate you scheduling this hearing. I've left several messages for the people in the front row here, messages, emails, letters, and it's encouraging that we finally get a chance to have a dialogue here on this topic. Mm-hmm. When I signed up for the public comment as the form came around, I kind of thought I would talk about the flawed process in the decision-making. I thought I would talk about the fact that the appropriate constituencies weren't really included in the decision, the urgency of the decision and the lack of communication thereof, the lack of transparency, the subjective criteria and scoring, and the lack of inclusion of the rest of the UC system in the decision-making process. I also thought I would, comment on the seemingly discriminant nature of this decision, the lack of gender equality with women's crew being cut, the fact that wrestling was cut, being the most diverse sport on campus, and the singling out of these 4 categories of athletes. However, with the testimony in the hearing and what the administrators had to say, one thing just really jumped out at me that I really just have to comment on. These are trying times. I think we all absolutely get that. I get it. I mean, I'm with CalPERS. I've been furloughed. I've taken a 15% pay cut in the past year. I understand how that goes. I'm an investment manager. I understand what it is to make difficult decisions in ambiguous environments. We all know how that is. I absolutely get it, and I think we all do. However, there's one comment, and it was a comment that was repeated several times with the administrators when they were up here that was repeated, and it's just really, really bothersome for me. I heard the administrators talking about core principles and the adherence to those principles and the terminology being "it depends," when Chief Counsel said that it depends on the adherence to those principles. I heard that they're guidelines and I heard that they're flexible. I have a real problem with this. I have principles in my life. Call them morals, call them ethics, call them what you want. A lot of them were things that I learned as a student athlete at Davis and before that. They're especially useful in trying times because they're very clarifying in making difficult decisions. But one thing that they're not is they're not flexible. They're not situation specific, crisis or otherwise. They don't depend on anything. These core principles were absolutely part of the students' decision-making and voting for the referenda. I was there in '93 when the first of the referenda passed, I believe. These aren't flexible principles. These are principles that were marketed to the students as part of the decision-making process. They were part of the students' decision on the voting, and they absolutely should be adhered to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Lexi Delgado. I graduated last year from UC Davis. So I have 3 main points. I think, the main point was obviously, we're dealing with a financial crisis. So obviously that was the most important part of the decision making, right? But obviously the second point was that, it's about choice, and the third is going to be about opportunity. Okay, so choice, the fact of the matter is that, the students voted, during my time, before my time, and during my time on those 8 core principles. And obviously, the university does want to have something more flexible, but that should have been part of that agreement. And I think that's something that they're going to have to resolve in the upcoming months and years, to make sure that they have a way out and to think it through. They're a very intelligent group of people. They can make that happen, all right? But they didn't, and so really it shouldn't be the students or the athletes dealing with that problem. It should be the administration, because they made that choice, right? They wrote that paperwork, all right? But there is really opportunity, okay? In some countries, an athlete is a profession just as much as an engineer or a chancellor. And actually in Russia, you could get a PhD in wrestling, right? And so right now we're dealing with a financial crisis, and if you look throughout history, a lot of times you have to spend to make money, all right? And if you want that money to come back, all right? And maybe the administration is looking more at like within the program, how that money comes back, and maybe they don't get great investment, but through the alumni, they usually make a lot of money back, and there have been quite a few successful alumni, and actually there have been a few that I've talked to that wanted to make contributions that now don't feel like they would want to do that anymore. Uriah Faber being one of them, and I know there's another that felt that in the future that he can make a very great contribution on the size of a Mandavi type of contribution. And I think that's not something that the administration really tried to look out for when talking to Alumni Association about this type of decision. Because obviously, if they had done that, like let's say they had cut football, the Alumni Association would have had so much dollars into that they're not going to make that decision, because they know that the Alumni Association is so invested into that program that they know they're going to make money back at some point. Right, and I think it's the same thing with wrestling and some of the other sports. And going back to opportunity, I think a lot of times I don't think they really thought it through what some of those opportunities are through sports. And so I'll give you an example with my life. And growing up, I grew up in a low-income family. We struggled, all right, and actually my parents did go to school, all right, but I grew up with them going to school. But we struggled so much that, the bed that me and my brother shared my bed, and we slept on a mattress that we found in the dumpster, all right, and that's because we knew that we're going to struggle now, but in the end, we're going to come out on top, all right. I come from a family that we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to tighten our belt, but we're going to make it through. All right? And I think that's the same type of mentality that a good administration has too. And, so going through some of these types of numbers, like I say, I'll get back to that. But look, coming into the school, I probably didn't look like I'd be the best student. I probably didn't look like I'd be the best athlete. All right, so the school took a gamble on me, and the coach took a gamble on me, and that's one of the reasons I really liked Davis, because they gave me an opportunity that nobody had before, and through the university. Well, first I'll go through wrestling. At first, they didn't some of the assistant coaches wanted to cut me at that time. Well, the head coach, he saw that. The type of will and determination that I had. And in the end, I became a national qualifier, and meaning that I was one of the top 32 best wrestlers in my weight class in the nation. And he eventually gave me scholarship money, which helped pay for my schooling. And that's another thing, is that, when you work hard, you should be able to get money, you should be able to pay back what you put into it. And, we're putting in more time and effort just to represent the university, and they get to feed off of our image, all right? And we're not getting as much back from them, and so you just hope that someday maybe you can at least help pay down your debt, because that's what when you leave the university, you're in with debt. So it's the same thing that we're doing as they're doing. We're investing to just, even though we're pinning ourselves to debt, we're hoping to make that money back, all right? Why can't the university do that too? All right, going with this with academics, I had a really hard time initially, but by the end, I was above a 3.0 for the last 2 years, and I was getting close to a 4.0. And my last 2 quarters, I was close to straight A's. All right, I learned a lot being at the university. I really learned to appreciate research. I want to become a PhD in research, and I want to. And I learned a lot of that by a lot of the internships and the opportunities that the university had, which they have to spend on those types of things just as much as athletics, right? And when I like I had internships at the Capitol. I've met a lot of key university officials. I learned a lot about how administrations work, and I know that's going to help me. And that's what helped me get my job, because I knew the system so well. And that's the reason that we invest into UC. And why can't they just do the same for us? And so I think that, and it's the University of California. And so actually I did some statistics on their student athlete population. And I've also read some paperwork. One of the things that they found lacking in their athletic program was diversity. And one of their goals was to get minority athletes to jump up into administrative roles. I think athletes such as actually most of the wrestling NCAA qualifiers have been Latino and Asian, and obviously white as well. But like if athletes such as Marcos, Ricky Alcala, or myself could have become in the future coaches that could have helped UC Davis, and so I looked at some of their percentages, and actually I won't give you all the numbers, but obviously wrestling actually came closest to the California population statistics, and with the cuts, the minority men are the ones that are most affected, and obviously the university is already having a hard time recruiting either students or athletes among minority men. And so here you have a program that's helping people with health and scholarship and education, and they want to cut that. And obviously it's something that I think that really invests into the people. And I think that I really wanted to invest into UC Davis because of what they helped me with, and I would hope that my kids would go there. But now that I see that they're not really thinking long term, I can't really think that as a safe investment. And I think that I would probably look somewhere else that's a little bit more smarter in their investing. And so I think that the UC has a good opportunity to help people by investing. And even though it's a tough time, following the Keynesian model, you invest, but you get that money back. And I think that's what they should do. I think they wouldn't have had all these people here if people didn't think that they can raise money. So there's a lot of initiative and a lot of self-drive, not just coming from the university, but people outside the university. And I think they should trust the people because the people trusted in them. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, Senator. My name is Dustin Nowak. Okay. I was a wrestler of UC Davis, an alumni, and I will be going back there in September to attend their veterinary medicine school. I want to thank you so much for the time and effort you put in today. I know that it's been a long one, and I just wanted to thank you. I was asked outside what brought me here tonight, what brought me by a reporter, and the first thing I said, or came to my mind, the first thing I said was, it's out of love. I love the people, my teammates, my coaches, and I just wanted to tell you guys that. The number one problem that I have with the process of eliminating these sports is the shut door policy, and I mean it on two sides, because one, transparency was a problem during the entire process, but afterwards, Chancellor Katehi repeatedly states the decision is final. The door is shut on the case, and in doing so, 131 student athletes are now shut and have to choose between the university they've come to love and the sport that they obviously love, or else they would not be going to 5:30 a.m. practices for it. I want to point out a few examples, and Senator Flores, if you could take a look at them, as well as Dr. Warzeka and Chancellor Katehi. Look at the California State University of Bakersfield and the California State University of Fullerton. Back in January, Bakersfield University decided to cut a few of their programs, wrestling one of them. They were kind enough to let them finish out the year, but by the Pac-10 championships that were held at UC Davis, they weren't going to be around next year. However, enough voice appeared and enough financial backing appeared, and all of a sudden it wasn't a shut case anymore. It was, you know what, we're going to look at this. And I know you're from Bakersfield, Senator. Next time you're down in Bakersfield, go check out one of the wrestling matches because they're going to be around next year. Yes. And Cal State Fullerton, they were given even a longer period of time, almost 1.5 years, to let them know that, you know what, women's gymnastics, men's wrestling, you're on the chopping block. If I were you, I'd start fundraising, or else you might not be around. And their recruiting class this last summer is quite impressive. Over 15 state qualifiers and placers, either from high school or transferring in. And to say that, you know, to use the excuse of pitter-pattering around and soft dollaring and financially surviving from year to year will not generate a competitive crop of student athletes, that's proof right there that it's a very flawed statement. Mm-hmm. And there is time to right your wrong. Chancellor Katehi, Dr. Warzeka, I know that it's not the easiest thing to come here and answer questions for 4 hours, and we all appreciate you doing that. But the biggest thing that we would appreciate right now is for you to admit the wrongdoing and allow the student athletes not to only fight for their sport, their athletic careers, but to let them stay at the place where they have grown into young women and young men and not have to be forced to choose between one or the other. That's really my message. Thank you so much, Senator Flores, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Dustin. We have Ron Pineda, Mel Knapp, and Eric Lobosinski. Said that correctly.
For the opportunity to come and speak this evening. My name is Ron Pineda. I've been around wrestling for 57 years, just about in every capacity you can think of. Wrestler, coach, high school, college, Marine Corps, San Francisco Olympic Club. Been a number of Olympic Games, eight World Championships. Seen it all. And out of all the years of wrestling, I think the last 12 years that I've been associated with UC Davis have been some of the finest. And certainly the coach they had here, Lenny Zaleski, is in my estimation, one of the finest coaches in the United States. The wrestling team, I can't speak any higher than any team that I've ever worked with. The people that come here to UC Davis to wrestle are a great group of people, and so are their parents, their families. We just a great family. We like to think of ourselves as a family. But I'm here tonight just to say that wrestling is the world's oldest sport, and in October, I'm going to be at the University of Illinois for a reunion for 100th year of wrestling in the United States, and I would only hope that UC Davis could someday say the same thing. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have Mel Knapp and Eric Lobosinski. Anybody else? Not here. Anybody else have any more public comment? They're welcome to come up at this point. Just state your name for the record, and then we will close up for the evening.
I'm Eric Loboshevsky. Thank you, Senator, for this opportunity. I'm a UC Davis alumni currently. Currently I'm a grad student at UC Davis. I attended UC Davis from 2000 to 2005 as an undergrad. So I was part of the 2002-2003 referendum in voting to go to Division I. Mm-hmm. And I was a little surprised that these core principles came up so much in this discussion tonight. Mm-hmm. And I can speak to what at least we were sold upon by the administration as to what these core principles meant. And they were sold to us as part of an inviolative principles. And I believe there's actually even a news article that came out prior to our vote that quoted the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs at the time, I believe it was Bob Franks, who put forward these core principles, and he said, quote unquote, they were inviolative. Mm-hmm. So it is honestly a little offensive to hear today that in regard, they sat with blank faces and didn't know how to respond to your questions as to, well, what happens when you get to fiscal problems? Can you violate these principles? And to have moments of silence and non-responsive, and to have legal counsel splitting hairs over what was sold to us and what wasn't part of the referendum and what was. It was not the case. That was not what was told to us. And I realize that that's not going to stand up to court. It wasn't a legal document that we signed, but it is in violation of the spirit that I've come in my 10 years at UC Davis now, that I've come to know UC Davis by. And a little bit more about myself. I was never part of an athletics team. I was a member of the crew team, the men's crew team, and we're not a funded program. We never were. And in coming to a decision to vote on the Division I transition, I was initially against it. And the reasoning there is all these funded teams have all this money. What the voting to go to Division I is just going to give them more money. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of discussions with my friends on the funded teams, on the crew team, on other club teams, was that, well, with this core principle that they're going to seek to add teams, if we go Division I, maybe someday I'll see my sport funded. Maybe within my time at UC Davis, maybe not. But that wasn't really a care in my mind at the time. Mm-hmm. And so to kind of see an about face, and Director Warzeka at the time was standing there championing this cause, standing in front of these core principles. And now it's kind of an about face. And I just don't see that as being fair to the alumni, the current students, the current athletes, and any of the future students. So again, like everyone's been saying tonight, I think this at least warrants a second look, and it would be nice to see that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Good evening. My name's Greg Dumas. I'm from Forestville, California, and once again, I'd like to thank you for this complete hearing vetting process. I know it's quite late, and a lot of people have a long ride, including myself. A lot of people ask why I'm here, Senator, and I have no particular background with UC Davis. I don't have a son that goes here. I'm not a graduate. I'm actually a graduate of Westchester State University in Pennsylvania. Was a former Division I wrestler on a nationally ranked program back in the 70s. And more importantly, I'm here because I'm an advocate for amateur athletics. And the real reason I'm here is because I just feel a moral sense of obligation to take a look at what's happened. I've also been a very successful businessman. I've been with two of the most successful IPOs in NASDAQ history. A lot of that background and work ethic came from my athletic background in the sport of wrestling. And I've also been a triathlete. As a businessman, I'd like to sort of just make the comment that I think some of the previous speakers may have mistaken intelligence for what I would view as arrogance. And I say that as a former vice president of a Fortune 50 company that really suffered during a huge economic downturn in the dot-com bubble bursting of 2001. What you don't do in an economic crisis is reduce your revenue producers. As a senior executive vice president at Lucent Technologies, the last people I got rid of were my salespeople. What you do is you look to streamline your costs. How many secretaries do you need? How many different types of gala affairs do you need to have? What's your core expense? What do you actually use to gain your revenue? Here in the UC system, your revenue providers are your students. They're the people that are your true stakeholders here. What I'd really like to implore you in your subsequent investigation is I'd like to request a line item budget. I would really like to see where this money's being spent. And I think tonight's also more of a, not just an investigation of what's happened with UC Davis athletics, but more of an indictment of what's happening within the UC system and where our money is being spent. I know every 2 weeks when my payroll comes, my state tax basically takes out a chunk of change, which goes to hopefully educate our children here. What I don't understand is how many levels of administrative assistance that you need within a university, how many different types of olive trees are you planting at exorbitant costs. Why are you building and expanding facilities when you're actually looking at rescinding students and student athletic programs? To me, it would be like building a manufacturing facility overseas when I'm actually on a downturn with my economy and also with my scale of business. So I would really implore to get visibility and to see where money's actually being spent, and not just saying, I think money was spent here and maybe it went here and I'm not quite sure. Those are not acceptable answers. And I also give you kudos for asking who takes accountability. At the end of the day, when I run a business, if something goes wrong, I'm the captain of my ship. If I don't produce, I get fired. That's the reality in the public sector. I think there's too much immunity from what I would call stupidity, quite frankly, with some of the decisions that are being made at the educational level here in the state of California, and people need to be held accountable when you do end up in a lawsuit for something that was not taken care of properly or imprudently. The other thing I'd like to state is the decisions that are being made right now to reduce these sports also are allowing us to lose our most precious commodity in the state of California. That's our students. You look at a situation where you become a mentor and you pay it forward by effectively being able to come back and like some other people eloquently stated, be able to be a coach in your community or be a mentor in your community. What tragically has happened now within the sport of wrestling, by UC Davis eliminating this, they are the last UC sport in the state of California that offered wrestling. There is no longer a UC in the state of California that offers wrestling. So if I was a leader of this ship and I wanted to be sort of a lighthouse university, I would look for a way to be creative here and keep that sport. There's over 27,000 high school wrestlers in the state of California. A large majority are Latino American and Asian American, and right now they're going to have to go to New York State, Iowa, Pennsylvania, you name it. They're going to have to go out of state. And there's been a number of presidents of the United States that have actually been wrestlers, so I kind of hang my hat on that. Last thing, what I don't understand is I've made numerous attempts to contact the administration here by FedEx letter, by email, by phone calls. I actually raise funds professionally. I've actually been an angel capitalist and venture capitalist. I've also been quite involved with helping Cal State Fullerton, Bakersfield, and San Francisco State save their programs. I feel it's disingenuous for the leadership of this university to just admonish that I have made a decision and that's it, without at least having a vetting process to see what alternatives are out there. I know as I run my business, I always look for open opinions. I may not agree with them, but I at least let it go through the full process. Ultimately, I make that decision. But to allow this to get to this point where you're having to be completely scrutinized, I feel it could have been completely avoided had there been an open process, and at least take ideas from people like myself that are in the business of helping raise funds. It can be done. It has been done, and I implore you to continue on this path to basically make sure that UC Davis does allow that process. We can do this through fundraising. We can endow this, but you have to not stonewall, and you not have to just have the arrogance and the hubris to say a decision's been made, the door is shut, and that's it. It's not a great way to run a business. I thank you for your time, and basically, God bless the state of California. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Scott Welts. I just recently graduated from UC Davis, about maybe a month ago, degree in economics. I swam for the men's swim team. I think I'm the last person here tonight, so I'll try and make it brief. What I'd like to do first is I'm going to read a speech that was I presented at the Hall of Fame dinner. Mr. Orzeka heard it once. Chancellor Katay managed to sneak out of that meeting, so I'm going to give her a chance to hear it. And then I just want to make a couple brief comments. At this The speech, I was thanking a lot of people for helping me with the award, but I think it might tie in tonight just to show what really goes behind a career and the people involved in how it's not just an individual you're cutting, but everyone is kind of involved. So I'm just going to read the speech. Here we go. First and foremost, I want to thank all those who played a role in me receiving this award. I'd like to thank my parents for all their support throughout my entire career, both emotional and financial. I want to thank them for the time they devoted to my swimming, driving me to practice at 5 a.m. before I could drive, and traveling with me throughout most of the West Coast for competitions. Lastly, I want to thank them. Lastly, I want to thank them for always believing in me and helping me to believe in myself. Sorry, I got choked up a little the first time. I thought I won it the second time, but bear with me a little. Second, I would like to thank my coaches, Pete Motikaitis and Rick Henderson. This award belongs to them as much as it belongs to me. Sometimes I feel that I have the easy job. I just need to get in the pool and do what they tell me to. Well, if you ask my coaches, getting me to do what I'm told might be the most difficult part of their jobs. I've never known coaches who put in more time and effort preparing their athletes so they have the opportunities to succeed, or who genuinely care for each athlete as an individual than Pete and Rick. Winning this award means a lot to me, and it makes me think back and reflect on my swimming career. I remember when I first began swimming competitively, after my first meet, waiting around for over an hour for my first ribbon, a black 8th place. Afterwards, I went with my family to a pizza place across the street from my house to celebrate. Fast forward to the end of high school, 2005, and I was trying to decide where I wanted to go to college. My mom wanted me to look at UC Davis because, being a teacher, she wanted me to receive a world-class education, something Davis could offer me. I was hesitant at first to give UC Davis a chance. All I knew of Davis was a water tower scene from Highway 80 and an In-N-Out burger off Richards Boulevard. But after coming to a recruiting trip to Davis, I remember immediately knowing that UC Davis was a place for me. The school, the community, and the swim team all made me feel like I was part of a family. The people at UC Davis, the students, the faculty, and staff have a strong sense of community. Everyone cares about one another. This is a quality that did not see or feel at other top institutions, and it is a quality that Davis should take a lot of pride in and hold on to. As a freshman, I remember how proud I felt to wear my team apparel with my school's name to all my competitions. Even more so as a junior and senior, being able to represent UC Davis at the national level at the NC2A championships. I had such a sense of pride wearing my UC Davis swim cap while competing against top schools in the country, including Texas, Cal, Stanford, and Auburn. I remember how awesome it was to see the University of California Davis flag hung between the flags of Duke and Michigan. But most of all, I remember this past year and all of my teammates. When together, we ran the boards going 8-0 and winning the Big West Conference Championships for the first time. Some may not realize how much of a team sport swimming and diving is, but when I am on the blocks anchoring a relay with my entire team behind my lane, I'm not swimming for myself. I'm swimming for a team that, throughout my career at UC Davis, I had the opportunity to form a family with. Adding this award to this perfect season, and I cannot imagine a better way to end my career here at Davis. But at the same time, it is a bittersweet ending. With the possibility of the men's swimming and diving program being eliminated here at UC Davis, I fear that I could be the last male swimmer to receive this award. I could be the last male swimmer who was able to represent UC Davis in the sport that I love. But worst of all, I could be the last student who, because of swimming, had the opportunity to attend UC Davis. I really hope this is not the case. I loved my time at UC Davis. Being a student athlete provided me with so many opportunities and helped shape me into the man that I am standing before you tonight. I want to thank everyone at UC Davis who had a part in providing me with these amazing opportunities, and also thank you for honoring me with this award tonight. So that was a speech. And just a couple of comments. I want to thank you for having us at this meeting. I also really want to thank everyone from the university for coming and speaking your guys' part. I think what's really troubling to me is that the faculty or the staff, and they believe that, they did the right thing, but as students, we really believe they didn't. And it's this gap in that really troubles me. I mean, even if we're not talking about sports, or we could be talking about maybe the faculty or someone wants to add a different major, but maybe the students don't want to. If there's this gap in what the people high up in the chain of command feel and what the actual students want, it doesn't really work that way. And I mean, we could argue all night about who's right and who's wrong and how it should have been, but I just feel this gap needs to be bridged somehow so we can all kind of come to an understanding that, maybe it won't help us in our college today, but maybe down the line it could help out someone. So, thank you.
Any other public comment? Please come up.
Hi again. Thank you again for taking all your time to do this. I have 2 points that I did not stress when I was up here. The first one is we don't want more money. That's obviously what we're going for. And then the one is that I want to know why the core principles, or formerly known as inviolate principles, are flexible. But when the question comes to about tiering, this one is not flexible at all. I, as an athlete who has not been cut, was never asked how I would feel about extreme sacrifices like decreases in funding like tiering, how it would affect me in choosing or other people coming to UC Davis. I feel that I deserve to know this because it would directly affect me more than, say, somebody in administration or something like that. I also want transparency. And that's one thing I've learned from academics and athletics, that if I do not accomplish my goal, if I can justify it, it's okay. That's why I requested the California Public Request Act, because I cannot justify or morally accept why my fellow student athletes' opportunities were cut just based on budget numbers. I use the analogy of transparency sort of as if I failed a test and I went to my teacher and I wanted to know why I failed. I would need to know exactly why I was wrong and where it was when I went wrong. And I would not learn anything if I was told that it was too complicated for me to understand. And that is sort of how I feel. That is how I feel this process has been on me. I've gone into the administrations. I've asked them to teach me. I mean, I'm dyslexic. I need to be told what these budget numbers that I have in front of myself, like, where are they coming from? But they won't tell me. Telling me that it's too complicated teaches me nothing. And I would like you to help us on finding out why it's too complicated, why I can't understand. So if you could help us finding more transparency. And if we find the transparency, and you can prove to me that the budget reasons say we have to be cut, I'm 100% fine with that. I'm an athlete. That's what I deal with. If I work my butt off 25 hours a day or 25 hours a week, and I get to the competition and some girl swims faster than me and I don't go on the relay team, and the coach tells me, well, she was faster this day, I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. And this process, I have not found that justification. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Zach Hansen. I want to mention a few more things. Okay. First, it's very ironic that 22% of athletes on our campus have been eliminated. I mean, as it stands right now, they're not coming back. 22% gone. And despite apparent cuts and furloughs and reductions to administrative staff in the Intercollegiate Athletic Department, 0 administrators have been eliminated tied to our elimination. You'd think by eliminating or reducing the workload by 22%, you'd lose 22% of those responsible for the workload. This hasn't happened. It just seems interesting that those people who have excluded the students from the process, these major stakeholders, are also making decisions that seem to protect those very people. And then there's also mentioned repeatedly in the Intercollegiate Athletic Department budget documents, there are references to the fact that they've been unable to get consumer price index adjustments to one of the initiatives that fund the Intercollegiate Athletic Department. Well, interestingly enough, despite the fact that those those increases are usually approved by the committee that oversees that. The final ruling really comes down to the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, which is Fred Wood. Now, he recently added, he was responsible for adding the Campus Expansion Initiative fees to summer students. Now, if that's possible, it seems to be a double standard that we can get it on one end, but the students say no on the other end. And then I would like to speak about the criteria. I mean, it seems to have come down to budget or size or lack of protection. But what we were given in the very beginning is a set of criteria. They've been called the Matrix, and they've been discounted by Intercollegiate Athletic Department administration, including Nona Richardson at the public forum that we were responsible for holding on campus. And yet the men's swim team, we had a meeting with Greg Warzeka 2 weeks after we were cut. It was explained to us that they were put together to inform those people who weren't involved really in the Intercollegiate Athletic Department. And it was a brief. Let's give you an idea of what these teams mean, who they are, and in that criteria, we found numerous flaws and errors stemming from what season the women's swim team competed in, to the wrestling team needing new facilities, and then we found additional criteria as a result of our Public Records Request Act that list men's and women's swimming as having an overcrowded facility when men's and women's water polo, who practice in the same facility at different times, granted, do not have that listed. And whether these were officially considered for the final decision, if they're involved at any point in the process, flawed logic anywhere in a process will lead to a flawed conclusion. And that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Benjamin West for the last time. I just was looking over some stuff, and so I want to put some information out there that I hadn't really heard anyone else talk about. This is a document that's dated April 28th. This is exactly 12 days after the UC Davis administration had their press conference and announced the cutting of these sports for budgetary reasons. And in this documentation is a request for the creation of a new vice chancellor position. And the thing that fascinated me about this created position is the salary. For someone, the high end on this salary is $374,500. And I can see that the creation of this position is to oversee a very large fundraising campaign that the university is undergoing right now. And basically what the university's goal appears to be is to raise by 2014 $1 billion. And in looking through this information, it looks as if they are somewhere in the neighborhood now of if you guys will allow me just a moment to find my numbers, it looks to me as if they're somewhere in this quiet phase of their campaign, getting ready to launch into the public phase, of having $548 million, $708,000 raised. And there are different areas that are itemized in here. This is through April 30th, 2010. And one of those is athletics. And in that highlighted yellow line, it lists $7,481,153.20. And so I guess what I'm really curious about is, with this grand amount of money that they're raising, them having these budgetary shortfalls, why is it that there's not a little bit more leeway for them to be able to apply some of these monies that they're raising to cover some of these things that we're here talking about? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good points. Okay, is there any more public comment? Okay, seeing and hearing none, it is 10 till midnight, so let me just simply say three things. One, obviously, thank you for all the wonderful comments. Thanks for administration for being here, and Chancellor and your team. Thank you for the student athletes and, of course, the parents and others who have participated tonight. Let me first and foremost say that we will have another hearing on this because we're going to digest the transcript and come up with a few more questions, obviously, after the transcript is out in about 10 days. But clearly, the assumptions that have been mentioned by the administration and the folks who have testified after them clearly have to be challenged, and I think it's important that we look at these again. And of course, it's been mentioned, every decision being final, even in budgetary situations, is never final because we were making decisions in a vacuum in many cases, and we have to, of course, wait to see what continues. But this committee will continue to search and ask the appropriate questions as we have tonight. And perhaps if we are not going to receive the requisite answers, it's time for some legislative solutions. And I do know my colleague Helen Thompson made a bold attempt in 2001. She's a good friend of mine, and I probably will have a discussion with her in terms of how to get moving on this from a university perspective. And so hopefully we won't have to move in that direction, but I would not discount it. Because clearly it's something that we feel very strongly, the students feel very strongly about, and there's been enough discussion about, I think it's been put by one of the public comment, very good public comment about the gap, and the gap meaning all of the community be involved in a transparent manner that allows for decisions to be made, as the Academic Senate seems to be saying, in a very deliberative manner. And I think that's important when you're cutting 131 students, athletes, that deliberate decisions are made in a deliberate manner based on assumptions in many cases that need to be discussed and agreed upon. And I'm not necessarily sure from what I hear from this hearing and from others that is necessarily the case. So I guess what I'm saying is stay tuned. There's more to come. And we really appreciate everyone being here tonight. We're going to adjourn the Senate Select Committee on Gender Discrimination and Title IX, and we will reconvene at the UC Davis campus most likely. Thank you.